There is a point in spiritual teachings where the ordinary mind can't follow. There is a point in which the teacher knows more than the student, and at this certain point, the student can't follow the teacher. That is, the student can't follow the teachings, the truths. You're seated here now, and up to this point now, you've understood pretty much what I've said. It wasn't difficult at all. However, as I go on and get a little higher, you may find it more difficult. And I want you to be aware from now on, as you pursue the inner life, I want you to be able to detect the precise point where your present mind can't follow the teachings, where the teachings rise above your ability to understand. Now, the reason it's very important for you to detect this point is because if you don't, you will go into an assumption and imagination that you do understand. And once you do this, it means you have simply gone into your own memories, taken a dozen or 1,000 out of there, got them all mixed up with what you heard, and then you develop your own idea of what this higher truth is all about. Having taken your own ideas about this higher truth as the truth, you have now blocked yourself to receptivity to the actual facts of the matter. So remember, watch very honestly your processes as you hear a truth talk, and watch for the point in which you honestly say, I don't understand that. I don't follow that. This is as high as I can go. Now, this is honesty. It means you recognize your present level, whatever it might be. And it's this recognition of your present limitation that eventually enables you to rise above it. So you have your choice of being honest in saying, I really don't grasp that, or of deceiving yourself into saying, I do understand that. And the world always takes this dishonest course. When they hear a truth, because it is not acceptable to their inner nature, to their dishonesty, they take it and distort it and say, I understand it. And they don't understand it at all. They have actually rejected it and put their own imagination, vanity, egotism in its place and called it higher truth, which means that they are the very same person they were before they heard the truth. They have not changed. They haven't permitted the truth to change them. Now, to illustrate this, imagine yourself at an airport with an airplane moving along the ground about to take off. And I'm standing there with you here in this room, and those of you listening to this talk. I'm standing there explaining this airplane to you, the airplane being a composite truth. And I say to you, as the plane moves along the ground, I say, now I want you to notice that this airplane has two motors, all right? You look at the airplane and you know for yourself from your own observation that what I told you about the airplane is true, correct? You have seen for yourself that the airplane has two motors. Fine. I next say, as the airplane moves along to take off, I next say, I want you to notice that the airplane is yellow in color. Please look and see that this is a yellow airplane. You look, you say, that is correct. I see for myself that it's yellow. No problem so far. Now the airplane has taken off while I'm continuing to ask you to look at it. And let's say it takes off and starts to circle upward so that you can still see it, but it goes higher and higher. And I next say to you, now I want you to notice that the numbers underneath the airplane are 267. You look up and you can see it, not quite too clearly because the airplane has gone up a little bit, but you see the number that I said was there and you say that's correct. What you said was correct because I can see it for myself. And next I say, I want you to notice the total shape of the airplane as it appears to you now, the way the tail mounts up and the way the wings appear to you. But you can't get a picture of its shape because it's gone too high. Now at this point you can say to yourself, I can't follow what you said. I can't clearly make out the whole shape of the airplane. Now this is the honest point, isn't it? Where you say to yourself, I can't follow you because the airplane, the truth, has gone too high for me to see for myself. Now, truth, or a teacher of truth, knows 1,000 things about that airplane that you can't see. It's too high for you. He knows them. So it's up to you to raise your perception in order to see what the teacher sees, correct? Do not deceive yourself. This is the main point for now. Do not deceive yourself into thinking you understand everything about that airplane, because there are many things you don't, and you must not go into assumption. You must simply say, the principle of self-honesty, that I just don't know any higher than I can see, which is honesty, isn't it? Now, remember what I just said while we go into the second part. There's a country which has two levels. The low level is down at the level of the ocean, sea level. And the other part of the country is mountainous, high level. There's a man living on the low level of the country, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. He doesn't know what to do with his life. He doesn't know what to do with his day. All he knows what to do is to go out and see what happens to him. And he's anxious and he's worried. So one day, he's walking down the street of the country, not knowing what to do with himself. He's a slave to his own misunderstanding. And he sees a billboard, and the billboard says, football game today at 2 o'clock. He gets excited. Now I know what to do with myself for the afternoon. I go to the football game. So he goes to the football game. That night he goes home. Next morning he gets up, has to start the process all over. He still doesn't know what to do with himself. And it makes him nervous and anxious. But this time, the second day, he goes out and he meets a pretty girl somewhere. And they get together. He spots the pretty girl. Now I know what to do with myself for the rest of the afternoon. He meets the pretty girl, spend a few hours together. He goes home, gets up the next morning, starts the process all over again. Walks down the street the third day, doesn't know what to do, and he idly picks up a magazine at a newsstand, and he opens it to a page that says, learn to play the banjo. Banjo is the coming sensation of the nation. So he rushes on over to the banjo studio, and of course you know that he takes one lesson and then loses interest in playing the banjo. And he goes home. This is his life from day to day. Have I explained in any way your life? This is the life of exterior attractions. The physical eye sees something and it leaps on it and says, now know what to do. This has told me what to do. This man has no life at all except to be drawn into things that are all wrong for him because he's living a mechanical, unconscious life and not living a life of his own. Here's a man who lives on the mountainous level, way up high. Now listen to this. This man living on the high level also doesn't know what to do with his life. Go real slow now. Are you following me? He also doesn't know what to do with his life, but he doesn't care. It doesn't make him anxious. It doesn't make him nervous at all that he doesn't know what to do. This man goes out into the world. He walks around the street taking care of his daily business, affairs, whatever they might be, family and all that. But he's never anxious over what to do. He sees the billboards and he sees the ads, but he's not attracted to them, because at the same time that he doesn't know what to do with his life, he does know what to do with his life. Has the airplane gone out of sight? See? When a human being says, I must find something to do, whether it's a woman or a banjo, I must find something to do. How's that for a choice? Maybe he'll be lucky and meet a woman who plays the banjo. A person goes through life and he divides himself by saying, I must find something to fulfill me. This means that he's believing in himself in the wrong way, which is why he's compelled, are we not, to go day by day, year by year, in trying to find something to fulfill us, which divides us, which means we're always going to be in that condition of looking for an outside attraction to try to make us feel fulfilled, but it's impossible because there's no one there to be fulfilled. It's only an idea, an illusion about ourselves. If we had 1,000,000 attractions a day into our life, we'd still go to bed feeling lonely and lost, because you can't fill something that isn't there to be filled. Take the other man now who doesn't know what to do with his life, but he doesn't care. This is because he's not seeking anything. He already has it. He doesn't care. Listen to this. You want to get spiritual about it? Listen to this. He doesn't care because he knows he's in good hands. He knows he's not in the evil hands of his own neurotic mind anymore. He's living from truth. He's living from God. He's living from true spiritual life. What does he care what happens to him? It can only be good. Can truth ever deliver anything but goodness to any of us? Therefore, this means when we're down on that low level, wanting something to come along, give us something to do, something to feel good about, this means we've separated ourselves from truth. Now, there it is. Now, all of you listening to this, wherever you may be, you have a chance to be honest right now. Never mind how much you talk about truth. Never mind about how many churches you go to. Never mind about how many books you've read. The question is, are you anxious about what to do with yourself next? You say, no, all is well. I have a family, I have money, I have all these things. What would happen to you if you lost them, see? You don't realize that you're depending on things to keep you in place. And they're going to change. Of course they're going to change, because you're now living in time where change is a natural part of time living. So don't kid yourself about that. I'm saying, if you're anxiously looking around for something to tell you what to do, you are a slave of your own misunderstanding about truth, life, and yourself. With honesty, you can say, that is right. You have described me exactly. I go out into the world anxiously looking around, hoping for something to make me feel good, hoping that things won't change because I've established my life on a certain sandy ground. And inwardly, you know it's a sandy foundation. I've established my life on that, and I hope the sands don't change. They're going to change. They're going to shift. They will change. You know that man on the mountaintop? He doesn't care whether the sands change or not. He doesn't care about anything out there because he's not living from anything out there. He's living very quietly, very easily. Now, here's the question. Really now, be very honest about it. This man who's in the seeming contradiction of not knowing what to do with himself, and yet he knows what to do with himself every second because he's in good hands, higher hands. Has the airplane gone out of sight? Can you follow that now? Maybe you follow it intellectually. Do you see for yourself? Are you living? Are you living what I said? Or are you hearing it, nodding your heads, saying you understand? Now, I know that what's going on. I know that. I know that you here, to one degree or another, are trying to understand. There's a certain amount of sincerity, or you wouldn't be coming back here all the time. And this part, it's okay for it to nod its head, but I want you to understand what part of you is saying, yes, I understand. And maybe it's just a little bit of you that understands, but you know that that's right, don't you? Yes. You know, when I said you can be entirely indifferent as to what's going to happen to you and yet feel perfectly safe. You're safe because you are no longer going to be the victim of your own sickness. Have you experienced that? Have you driven yourself crazy trying to make yourself sane? Wandering around this world hoping for that woman or that banjo to make you feel good? Give them up. Have the courage to not be attracted. But to do that, you have to know very clearly the elementary lessons that that woman can walk in front of you. That football game can be presented to you, and you have to see how your eyes automatically turn and see the announcement about it, get real excited about it, and said, there is my salvation. Your salvation in a banjo. How pathetic. Start with the elementary lessons of this now, in seeing that you don't know what to do with yourself. You don't know what to do, and so you yield yourself to anything that comes along. Know that, and see where it takes you, and it always takes you home lonely. If you want to go home in a different way, and then be able to go out into the world again in a different way, where you don't care, you're okay. You don't have anything to be concerned with. All is well, because you're living from truth. I'm going to read a short story to you. There was once a man who reached his 100th birthday. On that day, he finally realized something. He realized that he had been wrong all his 100 years. That man achieved the purpose of his life. There was once a rancher who was riding around his ranch one afternoon. All of a sudden, a big flood of wings came up around his head, and he looked up, and there was some swooping bats of all sizes, large and small, swooping around his head, darting at him, threatening him. Of course, this was a new experience for him, and he was terrified at all these bats attacking him. So he rode his horse as fast as he could back to the ranch house, and immediately asked the ranch hands around, have you ever seen for yourself seen these bats out in the field there? They attacked me, and I saw them out at the livestock there. And none of them had ever seen any bats before, so he phoned some local authorities who knew how to handle this sort of thing, agricultural experts. And he phoned them, and he told them about this attack of bats that was going on. And they made different suggestions that he carried out over the next few weeks. But all the suggestions they made did nothing at all for the removal of bats. They just kept coming, attacking livestock day and night. The other ranch hands finally were attacked too. So this just went on. He didn't know what to do about it. And in his frustration, he did what a lot of human beings do. He began to look around for someone to blame for this attack of the bats. And first he said, I wonder if it could be some of my neighboring ranchers down the range a little bit. Maybe the bats are originating down there and they're not taking care of it properly. And all these so-called experts that I asked to take care of this problem, they made a dozen suggestions and every one of them failed. No one wants to help me. And he grew very angry about it. One day he went out, he was on his horse, inspecting his property and livestock. And he was gone for a long, long time. And the other people at the ranch house were wondering where he'd been. Finally, toward evening, he came back on his horse, slouched over in the saddle, barely hanging on, unconscious. And they all rushed out, got him down off the horse, got him inside. And indeed, he was out. And a few hours later, when he came to, they asked him what had happened. And he said, I don't know. I have no idea. They said, did the bats attack you? What's all about? And he said, I don't know any more than you do. All I know is that I woke up here in my own ranch house here, and I don't know what happened. So time went on, and the bats continued to attack. And he grew angry and more frustrated and more hateful. There was this severe problem, and he didn't know anything to do about it, and no one would help him. That was his biggest frustration. No matter who he asked to help him, it got even worse. And he was almost going mad in his anger toward a situation. He wasn't in control of it, and all his life had been used to being the head of everything around there, and yet these little creatures called bats had destroyed his happiness, what he called his happiness. It went on a long, long time. He finally went out riding again about a year after the first bats had appeared. And this time, the same thing happened. He came back on his horse, unconscious. They ran out, took him down, got him inside. And this time he revived a little earlier. And when he was fully recovered, he told some of his ranch hands, here's what I want you to do. Get on your horses and go over to, you know where our property is. He told them, you know where our property is, over by the river there. Go over on one of those high cliffs on the river that runs through my property, and you'll see a bat cave. So they got on their horses, raced on over, saw that there was indeed the bat cave, came on back, reported him, you're right, there it was. And there is where it's been all the time. All these bats have been coming out of the cliff above the river all the time on your property. And he said, you know, I knew it all along, and I now will tell you what happened. A year ago, when I first came back unconscious on my horse, do you know what knocked me unconscious? My refusal to face my responsibility that these bats were on my property. I didn't want to face it. I knocked myself out. I blocked myself out. And for all this time, I've been riding around, bitter, angry, blaming someone else. For the bats are on my property after all. Now that we know where they are, we can do something about it. Simple point, huh? Or should we explain it a little bit? The bat cave is what? Human minds. The bats are these hovering, swooping, malicious thoughts that you can't control. Of course you can't control them. You try to control them, but the controller is the weak person who has the illusion that he's not a bat. The controller of the bats is a bat, right? Right. Does that make it clear why we've never got anywhere in clearing our minds out? Now here's the point. Remember the little short story I read a minute ago? A man lived to be 100 years old, and at that time he understood at the age of 100. He understood at the age of 100 he had wasted 100 years, and the minute he did that, he did not waste the 100 years. You had better check your age. And And you had better not waste another minute with what you're doing with your madness. It is your madness in those bats because you were responsible for them being on your property. Now, do you know what unconsciousness is, what sleep is? I'll tell you what it is. It's the refusal to see that you are responsible for yourself. The whole world has blocked itself out, blacked itself out. And the chief sign of that, of course, is resistance and anger when you try to tell them about it. That man came up to the bat cave and he realized the responsibility was his. He didn't want to see it. And so he fainted in order to have to face it. You know, you could take a piece of paper and write down at least 1,000 ways in which we deliberately put ourselves unconscious so we can continue to dream that it's someone else's fault. Don't you dare sit here tonight and think that we're having a lesson that is too elementary. If you had seen this elementary lesson, you would be so fierce with yourself. When you see a bat hovering around you, you know it's yours. I don't care if they seem to come from 1,000 miles out in a government agency, in a news event, in a spouse. You are responsible for every pain you have, 100%. The reason you still suffer is because you won't see it. You want to continue? Do you want to continue for another hour to let your mind be a haven for ferocious, malicious bats? If you do, you will fly in their own company and you'll destroy each other. I can tell what kind of a human being you are by noticing who you associate with. I'm talking right now socially. You'll associate with a bat just like you because that's all you know. You can't see above your own head. You can't say anything stronger or wiser than you are in your present state. Let me tell you what your problem is in connection with this bat. The problem is that is what I am. Now listen. You look inside yourself, and with this honesty about seeing the bat, and you see something and you say, that is what I am. Now what you see is helpless. It's helpless, but you won't accept that. You look at yourself and you see how nervous you are, how you lie about everything, how you know more than anybody, how you believe you're the darling of the universe. And you see that inside you, and you say, that has power, that can change things, that can do things, that's admirable. That, what you see, is helpless. Now we're getting closer. If you see that that which you are is helpless, that ends it. If you really do it. If you go out to your car and you see absolutely it won't run this morning, you walk away from it. Right. But we don't do that. We catch a glimpse that there's something wrong, that it's helpless, it's foolish, it's ridiculous, it's nonsensical, and then we say, that is going to lift me out. That is what's going to guide me through life. And every time you catch a glimpse of that, you knock yourself unconscious so you won't have to see it. Look at this. You see what you're like inwardly. You have no strength. You're cowardly and everything else. You look at it, and then because it is painful to see it, because it goes against your idealistic images, you see that and you say, I'm going to knock myself unconscious so I won't feel the pain. You haven't done a single thing but put the pain down unconscious. that rancher riding around fearful of those bats attacking his property and attacking him personally, wasn't he in pain? How can we get this over to human beings on earth that you're in pain even when you don't know it, when you don't see it? You feel it, you suffer from it. You're in agony, and then you go out to church and lie and say, I'm happy. And you sing a hymn and you talk about God. What's the matter with you? Don't you dare go another minute in your life without looking and seeing what is wrong in you and having the courage and the common decency to say, that is me presently. Now that is all right. Of course it's you presently. What are you? If you've got hostility in you, if you've got jealousy, you tell me what else you are. Now, don't you lie to me and tell me that the next minute you're loving and kindly. You were calling yourself that. And that's a lie, so that's a part of the jealousy and the hostility. They're all on the same level. Now, when you can see that all you are is misery and nonsense and lies and corruption, if you see that, you have the miracle of losing confidence. Did you hear that? You lose confidence in yourself, thank heaven. All this phony strength, all this phony belief in yourself that something or someone's going to change. Why don't you just give up altogether? Give up because it's the only sensible, intelligent, logical thing to do. How can a wrecked car take you anywhere? But you say, that's my car. It's in my name. I paid a lot of money for it. You paid $1 million for your neurosis and you're going to hang on to it? You don't have much sense. You can begin to have a little sense by looking at that car, by looking at that wreck of your life and saying, may heaven help me, but I'm going to pull the keys out of that car, put them in my pocket, and walk away. Do you know what you're going to be afraid of? That the horn's going to start honking and getting mad at you. You are. You think that car has power in itself, has consciousness. You really believe that. And science fiction movies promote that, don't they? And you look over your shoulder timidly. If you don't think human nature is insane, think of a man who refuses to walk away from a car that won't take him where he wants to go. And he insists that it's going to take him somewhere. Here's your problem. Here's what you're thinking. And you had better listen to what I'm telling you now, because this is the very key. That car won't take you anywhere. It's wrecked, right? And you've been depending on it how many years? How old are you? Right? All these years. All right. This is what I've depended on to get me here and there. And all it's taken you is to the madhouse. Right? With various names in it. Now this car has been taking me from, you know, that stupid marriage, that stupid boyfriend. How many women have ever known a stupid boyfriend? You know, that, you can raise your hand, ladies. See, that car took you there. Now you're concerned. Do you know you'd rather have a stupid boyfriend than have none at all? That's how stupid you ladies are. Haven't you ever felt relief when a man went out the door for the last time? No, you stupid ladies, you bawled. Because you don't know who's going to carry you to the next place, to the right place. How am I going to get there? You know, if I clap my head to my forehead about 10 times, it's because I feel like it. You don't mind, do you? You stupid people. You don't know how many wrong questions you ask. You don't have anywhere to go. Where did the car take you? Away from your home, right? Why don't you learn to stay home? By the way, apply that physically too. Cancel the dumb trip. That's one of our most marvelous sayings in this class. When the car won't take you anywhere, you get a little bit worried. This marvelous, attractive world, the disco palaces, whatever that is. The political conventions, whatever they are. They're going to take you to all these marvelous places where you're going to find something, and look what you find right inside that ballroom but your own miserable little awkward feet. See? If you see the wrecked car, that is, your present nature won't take you somewhere, and you refuse to go anywhere else, who said you needed something of your own choosing to take you somewhere? See, you just want another car to take you to future places to continue your own madness. That's what you want, and you don't realize that. You could take the breakdown of the car as the beginning of a new life wherein, and we have to change the illustration a little bit, wherein your inner nature changes so there's nowhere to go. But you know, that scares you. You're so used to chasing around and spending your money stupidly. Meeting people. Instead of meeting people, why don't you try staying away from people? Right. And that'll come very easily, very naturally, when you see your nature as it is, and you see that they're wrecked cars too. What do you want to run around with a person who owns another wrecked car? You know why you do that? Because he or she promises to take you places, down to the beach and up to the mountains, and your little childish, idiotic little mind gets all excited, and it goes back to balloons and sand pails down at the beach. You're going to have to develop an entirely new way to react to life, a different way. I said, you're going to have to develop a different way to react to the events of life. Now, you know the old ways. Do you know what they are? How many of you got mad today? How many of you were jealous today? How many of you cried today? How went into self-pity today? See, you know what your old reactions are. How about as an alternative for a different kind of a reaction, to develop what can be called a spiritual memory? I know you seated here and listening to this talk, I know your minds are crammed with spiritual facts. I know they're crammed with it, but you can't pull them out, can you, at the right time? You know, you're washing the dishes even, and the soap slips out and falls on the floor, and you go somewhere. You go somewhere with your old nature, don't you? And here's all that soap all over the floor. Now you have to get your hands out and rinse them, dry them, and get them. You even hate that bar of soap. Right? There's your, look, marvelous human being that you are. A bar of soap can make you mad. And it wasn't even ivory. You know what your old reactions are. You live with them. Will you begin to bear the discomfort? The discomfort must accompany a breaking out. The discomfort of doing something different. And let me give you an example of doing something different. How many of you here are nervous? Huh? How many are nervous but didn't raise their hand? Okay. All right. Every time you're nervous, tense, jittery, you do something about it. How many raid the icebox? when you're nervous? How many go on a drive? Well, you fill in the blanks what you do. Try to see that when you take your old reaction and go along with that, you are falsely comfortable. The way to change is to stay right where you are. When the bar of soap slips, you're washing dishes, the bar of soap slips out and goes down all over the floor. Instead of you automatically going into that petty reaction of nervousness, of annoyance, whatever it might be, you just say to yourself, I observed that a bar of soap slipped out of the wash basin, went onto the floor, got suds all over. Now I have to stop and start life all over. And my life is so filled with important things, I can't waste a second really to get that bar of soap. But fate is so bad to me. Instead of doing that, you do the opposite reaction. Instead of rushing to get it back in there, and so as to get your annoyance over so you can go into your new annoyance, you just slow down right there and let your hands stay in the soapy water if you want, and just be as nervous as you want without trying to cover it up with a secondary reaction, which is to get angry. That is doing something different. Do you know why it's doing something different? You're beginning to see the tyrant in you, this tyrant that is so cunning, so clever. He puts things over on us 1,000 times a day, all because we are in love with ourselves. Now look, being in love with ourselves is the very same thing as going along with the old reactions because we don't want to enter the discomfort of a new one. I told you 10 minutes ago, no matter what you do on the level of the intellect of ordinary repetition emotions, no matter what you do, you will stay in pain. You will stay scared. You'll wonder what's going to become of you. There's no way you can win by thinking your way out. Our minds are that wrecked car, that bat cave. You're calling on the bat cave to rescue you from the bats. Now, you're not going to make a move to get rid of all the horrors in your life. You're not going to make a move until this becomes conscious to you, what we've talked about. I talked about developing a spiritual memory. That means that you want to change more than you want to remain the same. Now, there it is. It couldn't be put simpler than that. If you came up here from California on the whole weekend and heard that one sentence, it had been worthwhile. You have to make your choice that you want to be different more than you want to stay the same. This means you're going to yield yourself to the blow now in order, and here's the beauty of it, you'll submit yourself to the blow of someone telling you that you're a blabbermouth. You'll submit to that shock in order to save yourself 10,000 shocks for the rest of your life. Isn't it a pretty good bargain? Pretty good deal, isn't it? Developing a spiritual memory comes only with a consciousness of suffering, an awareness of pain. And if I myself have one of my favorite statements in these classes, it's as follows: no person ever consciously harms himself. No woman, no man ever knowingly, consciously does anything against his own true interests. We do what we do simply because we don't know any better, but we pretend that we do. Now, the way to see what we're doing against ourselves is for you, during the break, which we'll go into a little bit, and your break, for you to see if you got annoyed at someone because it was a little crowded here tonight. Or when you go home tonight, some little thing comes up, some little disappointment. And instead of simply knowing that that disappointment went through you, the bat, see, you start blaming someone else for letting the bats loose. Don't you ever again accuse any other human being for you being in the state you're in. If you do, that will get so hardened, so fierce, you'll eventually be unable to hear truth. For example, in this class that's trying to straighten out your life, that's trying to toss the junk out of your life. All blame, here's the psychology of it, all blame causes division. Of course, I am the innocent victim of the bats. You are the cause of it. No matter what it is, even the bar of soap was the enemy. You have caused division, and now you're never going to get rid of any problem you have, any grief, any heartache. You're not going to get rid of it because you and your heartache are the exact same thing. You were nothing but that. Who said you were anything beside your agony? You find another entity inside you that's different from that agony. You'll never do it. Look, go ahead. Do it now while you're seated here. You're separated from your essence, who you really are. Tonight, will you make an extra effort just to see for yourself, develop your spiritual memory that we were talking about, see for yourself that no matter what move you make to quench the pain, it comes back and flutters down again and hovers over your head. No matter what you do, you can't do anything. Now that's not bad, that's good. For you to see what is hopeless is the beginning of authentic hope. For you to see that you can't do anything for yourself, which means that you can't think your way out, that you can't rely on your ideas, you can't rely on your escapes and on your dreams of getting a new man or getting a new woman or getting a new fortune. You sense this. You suspect somewhere inside of you, you suspect the truth of what I said, but you won't do it because you're afraid that there might not be an alternative to marvelous you. Now, this is atheism. This is someone who doesn't believe in anything but his own sickness, and that is what his God is. Can you imagine the state that human beings are in when they unknowingly and fiercely idolize their own neurosis? That's how bad off we are. Now, every once in a while, a man or a woman will come along who has searched out this point, I ask you to remember, this point to see that no matter which way you turn, no matter how many hopes or dreams or beautiful ideas you have, no matter which way you go, you end up in the same darkness, no matter what you do. Now, if I tell you this, and if I tell you that you must end up where you can't do anything more for yourself, then I want you to also remember what I'm going to say next. It is good, beautiful, necessary for you to do this. It's not good, it's not bad to be terrified by the fact that you can't do anything for yourself. When you begin to see that you can't do anything, you will begin to think that that's darkness, but it isn't. It's light. It's the beginning of light. The darkness is to lie to yourself and say, well, tomorrow, next time, the next woman, the next man. Sooner or later, you'll have to get to the point where you see so clearly that you can't do anything to save yourself, and so you don't. Isn't that nice? Oh, aren't you going to triple your efforts from now on? to see that you can't do anything so that you give up. You're going to be terrified. And I will tell you that that terror is part of the falsehood. Because that terror itself is the last-ditch stand of your old nature, which is seeing you slip out of its clutches and will lie to you and tell you, don't take the leap, or something horrible will happen to you. I'm telling you tonight that that is a lie. And I'll tell you what the truth of the matter is. The truth of the matter is, when you see you cannot rescue yourself, when you absolutely give up, not in despair, not really in despair, but because you understand. You understand you didn't have any strength, you didn't have any wisdom. All your life you lied about everything, and you never knew you lied. You told 10,000 lies a day and you never saw one of them. And you wrecked yourself and you wrecked the world. That's exactly why the world is what it is, and you know it. You come to the point where you see there's nothing left for you to do but to give up. And at that moment, you change from being an atheist to a lover of truth, to a lover of reality. You change from being an atheist on your intellectual level to someone who has given up his mind giving up the wrong use of his mind, and you become a believer, to use that word deliberately, in God for the first time. And oh, do you know from yourself the reality of this new state? You know how you know it? I'll tell you how you know it. Because you're a new human being. And that's not too strong a phrase, it's too mild a phrase. You will literally actually become a new kind of human being. You'll be sane, and you'll look back 10 years, 5 years. You'll look back and you'll clap your hand to your forehead. And you'll say, I must have been the most vicious, cruel, stupid, lying human being on the face of this earth, and you were right. God knows that honesty when he hears you say that. And God says, here's someone I can help. Someone who goes through the whole business. Who does it even when you're afraid? Who said you had to have courage? How can you have courage when you don't have it? When you have no idea what it means? You're not told to be brave. You're told to understand. You're told to give up. Cry all you want. Scream all you want. Shake all you want. But stand there, and don't you move away from that car. You stand right next to that wrecked car, and the time will come when you'll wonder how you ever could have loved it the way you did before. You wanted to take you somewhere. You now understand quite clearly where it took you. Now you don't want to go anywhere. You've arrived. You're arrived in your spiritual home, and you know it. And all this self-deception of 10, 20, 30, 60 years, all this self-deception is very, very well understood by you. You understand it clearly because you are no longer suffering from it, because it's no longer there. And you know you're not in pain. You know you've changed. Billions of people around the world could tell you you're the same person that I used to know 20 years ago. You know better. You know it. You know why they think that, because they haven't changed, and they don't know that there's such a thing as God. They don't know that there's such a thing as a human being having an authentic inner miracle, a very personal miracle. But you know it. You know what's happened inside of you. And in that is rest. Picture in your mind a long, narrow bridge over a deep canyon. At one end of the bridge, also picture a cabin. And there's a porch on this cabin on which a man is seated at a desk, as if he sits out there and works all day, which he does. This cabin faces one end of the bridge. And there's a sign over the cabin, and it says, Bridge Keeper. And that's what he is. He takes care of the bridge. In back of the cabin, there's a beautiful, pure stream flowing. And there's a sign alongside it that says Water of Life. And let your eyes travel across this long bridge, across the canyon, over to the other side. On the other side, there's quite a scene, quite different than the other one. And over on this other side, there are dozens of human beings wandering around, bumping into each other, cursing each other. And the reason they're cursing each other is because on this far side, there are just 4 or 5 pools of muddy water. And they're very thirsty. And they fight each other for the water, the muddy water at that, in the pools. 2 or 3 will run down to get a quick gulp of water, and 2 or 3 others push them away. They fight, they scramble back, fight among each other. This is their life over there, trying to get a drink of water and fighting each other over it. Travel back across the bridge again. Here's the bridge keeper. And he's seated there, and he's watching people on the other side. Every once in a while, someone over there gets to the start of their bridge, their side of it, and they come out on the bridge, and they're very timid. They look apprehensively around. They look back to the land they're leaving. They put their hand on the railing, clutching it tightly, and they go out a few steps, maybe 10 or 12 yards, and they look down, and they tremble. They turn around, get their other hand on the railing, and go on back to where they were. So all day long, the bridge keeper watches people start from the other side, come out a little bit, but they're unable to make it. And they go back to their scrambling and fighting and to their thirst. One afternoon, the bridge keeper was seated there where he could see everything. And he saw one man who was 1/3 of the way across the bridge. So when the bridge keeper saw something like that, he became quite alert. He jumped down off the porch. He went down to the entrance of the bridge just a few feet away from the cabin. And he tried to catch the attention of the man, which he did by waving, and he started encouraging him. He said, "Come on, you can make it," waving him on. And he pointed to a sign that was right alongside the bridge, which could be seen from the other side. And the sign said, "Welcome. This bridge is perfectly safe. Welcome. This bridge is perfectly safe." And he kept urging the man on, and very, very slowly, but very steadily, the man came over halfway point, 3/4. All the time he was pale and he was stiff with fear. And he looked back with great longing to where he had come from. All those friends of his and his relatives were fighting each other for the water. He looked back, and then he turned around and never looked back again and came all the way over and landed on the other side. The bridge keeper came up and he congratulated him. And the man was still in sort of a stunned state. It had been a very emotional experience, spiritual experience. And the newcomer said, "I saw that water when I got over at a certain point. May I go and have a drink?" And the bridge keeper said, "Yes, that's what the whole trip is about. So you can come over here and live over here and have all the water you want. Go up to the stream, have a drink, all you want, and come back to the porch. We'll talk a little bit. There's a few things I want to tell you." So the man went over and his thirst was satisfied, came back to the porch, and the 2 men started talking. And the newcomer had so many questions, 1,000 of them, but he started off with this one. He said, "Mr. Bridgekeeper, I know I had to come over here. That was my task. I just couldn't take the life over there anymore. I was one of them. I was just as mad as the rest of them. You saw me over there. And so I just had to come here. But now I have a question. Now that I'm here, what do I do next? And the bridge keeper smiled a little bit, and he said, well, that's an easy one to answer. What you're going to do next is take my place. And the newcomer, he thought about that a little minute. He said, I'm going to take your place? And then it hit him. He said, oh, no. You mean to say that I'm going to have to put up with all those idiots over there like you put up with me for all those years? I have to go through that, what you went through? And the bridge keeper said, yes. You see, there's a very, very definite spiritual law involved in this. You have been working for yourself up to this point, working very hard on yourself to get over to this side of the bridge. Now that you have achieved that, to go any higher, you have to start working for someone else, too. You can't just work for yourself anymore. You've learned something. So what you're going to have to do is take my place as the bridge keeper here. And I'm going on to other things. I'm going to replace another man who's going to go even higher. And someday you'll come up and you'll take my place wherever I'm going. This is an actual law that you're going to have to obey. So there you are. You're going to be the bridge keeper now. But now, before I leave, I want to sit here with you a little bit and show you a few things. You're not going to believe what's going to go on. Well, you might. But now watch what's going to happen. And the bridge keeper looked at his watch and he said that those people over there, they're so predictable. You can prophesy every move they're going to make because they're all like little machines, little mechanical machines, do the same thing all the time. He said, yeah, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Watch what happens. And what happened on the other side, as they watched, a woman, a middle-aged woman, came out onto the bridge, and she took a few steps forward to cross, and she looked longingly over to the far shore, far side, took a few more steps, clutched the railing, a few more. And when she was about 1/4 of the way out, a man came rushing out from the side there, shaking his fist at her, screaming at her, and he stood in front of her and he pointed back to the old place where she'd come from, and ordered her to go back. And she broke down and cried, and she went back. And it was obviously her husband that had done that. Bridge keeper looked at his watch again. He said, well, it's time for the next one. He always comes about this time. So a man came out, and the bridge keeper said, now take a look at him. See if you can see what I have known for years, actually. He does it all the time. Notice he has a big, heavy, floppy coat on. And if you look carefully, even from this distance, you can see there are several bulges in his coat. You know what he has in there? He has jars of muddy water. He wants to come over to this new side and bring his muddy water over. But watch what happens. Any man who would do that doesn't qualify, so watch. He'll disqualify himself. The man took 2 or 3 more steps, turned, and went on back. So they watched for a little longer and watched all sorts of strange people come out into the bridge and go back. And the bridge keeper said, now, there's one more lesson I want you to learn before I leave. And I'm going to illustrate it to you so you can see for yourself. So watch carefully, the bridge keeper said. So bridge keeper got down off the porch, went onto the bridge, walked all the way over to the other side while the newcomer watched. The bridge keeper was over on the other side, and when he got there, you would think that the greatest storm on earth had broken loose. All the people started screaming at him and hating him, and then went over and got a handful of this muddy water and tried to throw it all over him. But as the newcomer watched, the water would come up, and there was this sort of an invisible shield there so that the man wasn't touched at all by it. And the bridge keeper just wandered around a little bit and came on back, walked on over, and he said, now, to the newcomer, he said, the reason I did that, I want you to know that any time it's necessary for you to go over there, no one can touch you. You can't be harmed. Once you have arrived here, you can go back there quite safely, and no one can ever touch you. See, once a person catches sight of that water, his nature is beginning to change, and he comes over there and the water changes it. So you have nothing to fear. For example, you might cite someone over there who's even too timid to start the journey, and you can go over there and be safe. They can scream at you, they can do anything they want, shake their fist, they can't hit you. There's nothing they do, absolutely nothing. And so you can be talking to that one man, or maybe that wife whose husband wants to keep her from coming over here. You could say a few words to her, and she will understand. Does any woman come alone like that out there? She would understand what you're trying to do, and she will love you for that, because you're telling her the truth. So they talked a little bit more, and the bridge keeper went away, and the new bridge keeper took up his position and helped people come across. There was a great mansion at the edge of a large city, and in this great mansion lived one of the world's most successful businessmen. He had great political power. He had great influence around the world. He had homes all over the world. He had his private airplane. This executive had everything that the world had to offer. One day, as he was going out of his mansion to go down to the big city, to his big office, he went out the door, walked down the walkway, and he saw his gardener standing there. And the executive said, "Good morning, Kenneth. What fruit do you have for the office this morning?" And the gardener said, "Well, I've picked some apples and some grapes that you like to give to the office people. Here they are." So the executive took the fruit basket, put it in his car, and he looked at the gardener, and they chatted a little bit informally before he drove off. And the executive saw that the gardener named Kenneth was just about his own age and had been with the family for a long time as general handyman gardener. So the executive got in his car, drove down to the big city, went to the enormously tall building, went up in the elevator to the top suite, gave the fruit basket out to one of the secretaries to distribute among the office workers, and went in his office and began his day's work. Noon came, and he was a little bit tired. It had been a rough day, lots of phone calls from around the world, people wanting things from him and critical business affairs to handle. So it was noon. So he did as he usually did, sat back in his chair near a very wide window and looked down at the great city below him there. He was way up on top, and he could look down and see all the hundreds of other tall office buildings. And he was sitting there looking from building to building. He noticed one of them in particular, which he remembered he had visited some months ago. And being a well-known man, he had been called upon to take part in a committee to fight poverty and hunger in the world, a social organization. So he had been in that building that he was now looking at. And he remembered what had went on. There were 40 or 50 men and women in the room discussing how to lift hunger and poverty in certain nations around the world. Then his eyes went to another building, and he remembered that he had also served on a committee there. This time the topic was crime. He had been chairman of a certain organization to understand and reduce crime around the world. And he remembered that meeting also, how they'd sat around. One man would give an opinion, another would give a counter opinion, and there were books of evidence and all sorts of facts about the reduction of crime. So that meeting. His eyes went to a third building where he had attended a certain social type meeting in which they were going to take care of petty, small quarrels between nations. For example, one nation would claim that the river that ran as a border more water was being taken by one country than it should have. So he served on the committee to settle the quarrels between nations. And as this very wealthy, successful man was sitting there, he thought something that wasn't clear to him. A thought came into his mind that was quite strange, that he couldn't figure out. It wasn't clear to him. So he sat there and wondered what this little small upsetting emotion was inside him. And he thought it might be connected with the fact that he had served on these many committees, social, religious committees, for making the world a better world. And he remembered also at that time, as he was sitting there during his lunch hour, he was remembering that as a younger man, he'd been interested in spiritual principles, in inner life. And he had studied certain religious books and philosophies and esoteric books. And he enjoyed them, liked them, and they had a certain meaning to him. But he got out into the world and was so involved with making a lot of money and conquering the social world that he forgot about those. And he began to think, however, on this particular day when he was sitting up there, that there might be some connection between his earlier studies of authentic religion and this bothersome thought. So a few days passed, and he was called on the telephone to come to attend another one of these social improvement meetings. So he went down the meeting place, and sure enough, there were a big room full of people, 70, 80 people waiting there. And the discussion came up on some social issue on how to improve the world. And he sat back there in his chair, and he listened to the men and the women get up one after another, giving their opinions for making things better, solving war problems or whatever. And after sitting there for a half hour and hearing these speeches and comments, all of a sudden he was overwhelmed with a right thought. He understood what was bothering him when he was sitting up in his office before. He understood what was going on in that room where he was seated with all those people around trying to solve the world's problems. He understood it with utter clarity. Just about that time was his time to get up and contribute something. So he stood up behind the platform, on the platform up there, and looked at the audience, and he said, "Gentlemen, ladies, I've been sitting back here thinking about not only this meeting, but every organization in the world that claims to be able to save the world from itself. And I want to tell all of you in one sentence a thought that came to me. Ladies and gentlemen, here it is. You are all talking about the wrong things." And they sat there wondering what was happening. Here was this man who had contributed so much in the past, and now he was telling them that they were all talking about the wrong things. So they asked him what he meant by that. And so he explained. He said, "Gentlemen, if you have an automobile that doesn't run, that doesn't work, and you take that automobile and you park it out in the desert for a few days, and then you tow it over to a forest and park it there for a few days, and you take it down the beach and park it there for a few days. Gentlemen, no matter what you do with that car, it still doesn't run. Putting it in a different position doesn't do a thing for it. You have to repair the car, not just move it around. And gentlemen, I have seen what is going on in this meeting and all those hundreds of others that you and I have attended. We're all talking about the wrong thing. We're simply shifting the problem from one place to another, and nothing really changes. So one of the men got a little bit spirited, and he said, well, Mr. Executive, if we're talking about the wrong thing, what is the right thing to talk about? And that executive, remembering his spiritual studies of many years ago, he said, in all honesty, I really don't know. But I do know one thing. And gentlemen, I think you know it too, if you're real honest, that what we're doing here is simply a waste of time. We're talking about the wrong things. What the right things are, I'm not sure. I'm going to find out, but I just don't know. So he went home, and he remembered, as over the days, how his abrupt presentation of the fact that they were talking about the wrong things, he remembered how it disturbed them. But he knew it was right. They were simply shifting the problem from one place to another, not solving it. So he gave many talks after that over the next few months, and this time he just set the thought gently into his talk so that they hardly noticed it, and yet it was there. He would say something like, gentlemen, we're talking about the right things, about the wrong thing. We're talking about the wrong things. And as long as we do, nothing is going to change. We're not going to solve the problem of hunger, of war, of crime, or of anything. So he left it at that, because that is what he understood from himself, that it was useless to simply get together in a committee and talk, because nothing really changed, and you know it, and I know it. One day, after giving many talks in which he subtly slipped the idea into his talk, his secretary buzzed him and said, the senator is out here to see you. And he gave the senator's name, Senator Blank, from one of the western states. And the executive wondered what the senator wanted. Probably a favor of some kind, or wanted to know about something. So he said, send him in. Senator came down, they shook hands, came in, they shook hands, and the senator seemed a little bashful, as if he didn't know what to talk about. And indeed he didn't. He sat there and fumbled a little bit, which was unlike him. And he finally said, Mr. Executive, I don't quite know how to say this, but you know, I heard you give a talk a couple months ago, and I've never been able to forget one thing you said. I tried, but I can't. You said we're all talking about the wrong things. And you know, you're right. I have been to thousands of meetings which were going to solve individual and social problems, and nothing has changed. You're right. Do you know anything more than that? And the executive said, no, I don't, but maybe you and I working together could find out more. A few days later, another phone call, another person came in, a famous industrialist from another part of the country. He said the same thing. I heard you give a talk, and the only thing I remember is when you said, we're talking about the wrong thing. Famous lady author got in touch with him, said the same thing. You know, I remember that talk of yours for just that one sentence. We're talking about the wrong thing. Finally, they got together, till 10 or 12 people got together, to think about this very strange situation in which they understood that something was wrong, but they didn't know what was right. But they knew it was right to know that there was something wrong, and that at least was encouraging. One afternoon they decided to get together in a little group and see if they could probe the situation a little more. So they all gathered together at the executive's home out in the country. And a big table had been set outside. It was a nice, pleasant day outside. And they were seated around with the water and little fresh refreshments there. And they began to discuss this strange situation where they had a half an answer to the problem. They knew what was wrong, but didn't know what was right. So while they were talking, the executive noticed that Kenneth the gardener was over at one side doing some work, and suddenly occurred to the executive to have some fruit served on the table. So he called Kenneth over and said, go get some apples and grapes off the vines and trees and bring them on over for our guests. So Kenneth, the gardener, went on over and put plates on the table, napkins, set the fruit on top, which took him about 15 minutes to set it all around. And while he was there, it suddenly occurred to the executive to speak to him. And he said, Kenneth, you've been overhearing, I'm sure. You couldn't help it. We were talking while you were serving us. You've been overhearing what we were talking about. Did you understand anything? I'm sure it was very confusing to you. And Kenneth the gardener said, yes, I understood everything, absolutely everything you were talking about. And everyone paused and stared at the gardener. And the executive said, do I understand that you understood everything we was talking about? Would you care to comment on that? And Kenneth said, listen, I have some leaves to rake down. If you'll excuse me, I have some work to do. And the executive said, please come back. You've intrigued me. Please comment on your comment. Well, Kenneth said, well, all right, since you asked, I'll tell you. You're all talking about the wrong things. And again, there was some surprised faces in the crowd. And the executive said, could you explain even more of what you're talking about? You have us more confused than edified. So the gardener explained. He said, I understood everything you were talking about, that things were wrong in the world. I know that. And since you ask, I will tell you, gentlemen, that you're talking about the wrong things. And they said, please explain that. He said, well, it is necessary at the start of your spiritual journey to know that the world is always talking about the wrong things when it talks about solutions, because it has no solutions. It has no answers. These are delusions. The people who are causing the problem call themselves the problem solvers. By this time, they were all listening to every word that the gardener was saying. So he continued, and he said, you can, once you understand the darkness of this world, begin to talk about the right things. And someone asked, well, what is the right thing? What are some of the right things to talk about? And he said, I'm pretty busy right now. As I said, I have a lot of work to do. And they said, no, come back, please, give us some of your time. So he stayed there, and he said, the right thing to talk about is the loss of self-glorification. And that was quite a bit for them to try to understand. And then some of them repeated, they said, the right thing to talk about is the loss of self-glorification. Then that means we're glorifying ourselves. He said, yes. Even in going over and over again and saying there's something wrong, you are getting a certain ego gratification out of finding something wrong with the world. That's necessary at the start, but you're going to have to go on much deeper than that, and the way you do that is to see what's wrong with you. The word glorification might sound like a religious term, the gardener went on, but it's a perfectly good one. Because if you'll look at all those people around the peace tables, all the people who are going to save the world from hunger, all the people who are going to solve the problems, can't you gentlemen see that they are living purely in self-glory? They want to be the one to solve the problem of hunger. They want the one to get their names in headlines so they can be elected senator. All the people who are talking about the wrong things, they're doing that because they're talking from the only level they know, which is the level of personal self-glorification, which is ignorance. So he talked to them for a little bit more and told them a few more facts. And finally the executive said, Kenneth, you've been around here for 12 years, and this is the first time you've ever spoken to me about these things. Don't you know that I was yearning over these 12 years? I didn't speak to you. I know I did. Couldn't you see that I wanted some answers to life? I have all the money, everything I want. Couldn't you see it in my face? And the gardener said, yes, I knew that. Well, why didn't you say anything? Say something. And the gardener said, well, because there's a law that covers that too. And the law that covers that is the law that says, you must ask. You cannot give truth, cannot give spiritual principles to people who would take them and toss them out. When a person asks, then you could give them to them. And you finally, after 12 years, you asked me. It happened to come about that you asked me, and I could give it to you. And that's the end of the story. But there's a lot more to be said, isn't there? What do you have to do? I'm talking to you now, and those of you watching this film. What do you have to do in order to start talking about, thinking about, working about the right things? I wonder, by the way, whether you really deep in your hearts know that there is no hope for this world the way it presently is, because nobody knows. They're deluded. All those men in their suits and their ties, and the ladies coming in behind them in their pretty dresses. All those people care for just one thing, which is to see and to be seen. And to make it look good, they talk as if they know what they're talking about. And you say to them, look, sir, look, madam, if what you're talking about works, how come it doesn't work? How come you seem to solve one problem with one country and two more problems break out in another? Or you seem to get two human beings who are quarreling together. You seem to get them back together again, and it breaks out in another place the next day. How come people are simply shifting their problems from one place to another, simply covering them up? When you ask a human being that question, you're going to make him nervous, because you're confronting him with the dreadful facts of life as it is. And he is not going to appreciate what you're saying. He's not going to like you. A man or a woman never likes anyone, no matter how gently you tell them, sir, you're talking about the wrong things, because that's all you can do. Because you don't know the truth, therefore you must talk from ignorance. You tell a human being that, and he's going to say, I don't want to come back to a class like that. I don't want to talk to a man or a woman who's interested in telling me the facts about myself, because I'm very happy in my delusions. Why don't you let me alone? Why don't you leave me alone? Yes, we will. Absolutely. There's one type of person, and one only, that the truth will hound, that the truth will haunt. The truth will keep after a human being who says, who prays, save me from myself. That prayer is heard up in heaven. And truth will keep after you in spite of yourself. When you push it away, it'll come back again. And you run away, it'll come back again. No matter what you do, because it heard your prayer and it knew it was real originally, it'll keep after you. The others know. See, it just so happens, this is a very strange thing to people who don't know, It just so happens that truth knows the human heart. It knows the heart of every person in this room, whether it's you, whether it's me. It knows it 100% accurately. And it looks down, and if it sees that you're tired of lying, then it knows that that's your prayer. If it sees that you're tired of punishing yourself, then that's the prayer, and it will answer that. And I will guarantee you that if it sees a person who has hardened himself, a person who wants to commit blasphemy, I said, if the truth sees a person who prefers to commit blasphemy by sneering, I will guarantee you truth will go away and have nothing more to do with that man or woman, because that man or that woman has chosen his destiny for himself. What's your prayer here tonight? Want to call it a wish? That's all right too. What's your wish here tonight as you're seated here? Do you want to go back to your self-deceptions? You may if you wish. I had better tell you, there is such a thing as pushing away the truth so often and so long that you will never be able to hear it again. Nicely, there is such a thing as beginning to open yourself to it. Not taking blows from truth, because truth never strikes anyone. You say this is hard to understand, this is hard on the ego. That has nothing to do with truth. Truth is gentle and truth is loving. The blow comes from your own resistance to what truth is trying to get through to you. The blow comes because you refuse the lesson, because you say you know better. Why don't you just give up the whole business of fighting? And you can start doing that even if you only have a faint notion of what it means. You're only required to do what you can do at the present moment. And if there's a faint glimmer in you that says, you know, what I've heard tonight is the pure truth, which it is. What I've heard tonight is the pure truth, and in spite of every obstacle inside or outside me, I'm going to go along with that. Because I have never solved my own problems. I am always talking about the wrong things. The wrong things being to complain against life. The wrong thing is to say that I can't make it. You will notice that every excuse